So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
Welcome to the Permission to Be podcast.
I have a dream today.
Today we are talking to our friend Andre Henry.
I have a dream.
Yeah.
I have a dream today.
Night blue like living in my rear view. Pull over, turn around, pat down, shut up or you get smacked down. Check you and arrest you if you ask why. Old Jim Crow cop costume, same story. Still on a search for Zion in the red, white, and blue. Oh, say, can't you see we're all not safe in the land of the free?
We are really excited to bring you this conversation today. And just as a fair warning, we talk about some really sensitive topics in really deep and authentic ways. So, content warning for sexual assault and racialized trauma and probably some other things in there that I'm probably forgetting. We wanted to do this episode a little bit differently because Andre is not just an activist, but an artist. And so throughout this episode, you will hear Andre's art and music woven into the episode as we talk about Andre's new book, All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep. And just so you know, we're actually going to be doing All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep for our next book club. So if you want to join that, you can join our Patreon community, or when we post it onto our social media, be sure to comment and let us know so that we can reach out to you and invite you into that space. Hopefully the conversation today will really help you see the beauty of the conversations that we're going to have as we discuss Andre's book, and not just Andre's book, but social revolution as we continue our current series discussing the moment of now. Thank you so much for bearing with us as we took our time to get this episode out. And life has been happening, and so we're actually figured we're just going to make an episode about the life happening and invite you into some authentic relationship in that way as well. As always, you can join our Patreon community to continue to support the work. You can subscribe to the Permission to Be newsletter, and we're always looking for other opportunities and ways to be in community. This is Tommy, and if you don't know, I'm going to be leading a legacy trip with my dear friend Letty Gore, who is a historian. And so if you're interested in that, we'll post a link that you can get more information about legacy trips in general. And then we'll see you on the other side. The song you heard in the introduction was America by Andre Henry.
America, America, is this real equality? I think you could be understood, but do you wanna be? Yeah. Do you wanna be? No, I'm not sure you wanna be.
Hello and welcome to Permission to Be.
Let's hit him with the remix.
Oh, well, y'all got to change
Yes.
that.
Yes.
What do we do?
We leave our F-bombs in, and
Let's tell some stories.
As long as white people are bound, the people in power are bound, they're going to keep us bound to the same thing that they're bound to.
Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, and I think out of the overflow of the spirit, the body does.
Challenge some narratives.
Why is that the best that God could offer you?
Mike made it very clear that he did not want to get any of these questions beforehand. So he is getting this question live, raw, for the very first time.
This is...
And I feel like art is the expression of the heart where words fail.
Oh my goodness, I have tears. Oh, y'all are killing it.
Unfiltered.
I feel like that's gotta sound strange.
Permission to be.
Actually, my literary agent, when we were talking about what book might I write, he was like, I mean, A Black Man with Hope is an interesting book.
Oh, shit. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another lovely episode of the Permission to Be podcast. We have been laughing it up already with our dear friend Andre Henry's in the house today. What's up, Andre?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Again. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming again. Like we also have in-house Olivia and Becka. Woo woo.
Hey.
Hi.
And we're gonna talk about your book, Andre, All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep.
Wonderful.
But all right, before we do that though, we kind of already started it. The off mic version, but the on mic version of how are we coming into the space today?
Oh, yeah. I'm coming in a bit drained. A lot is going on in my personal life, but I'm also I'm excited to talk with you all. This is energizing.
Aw, so good to hear. So good to hear. I'm actually a little tired today, but like, you know how like you're tired and you don't have, like, if this was anything else, I would not have the energy for it. But because it's like it's Becca, it's Olivia, I'm like, oh, all right, bet I'll be there. So like, I don't know what that says as much as like there's a comfort that I'm coming into the space with, and that feels really, really good. Like, and I can just be myself of like, hell yeah, I'm tired, but also I'm with my friends tonight, and this is going to be dope ass conversation.
Yeah. I forgot about the time difference for a minute. I'm like, yeah, it is nighttime for y'all.
Yes, it is.
The night is young here.
Right?
The sun is still up.
I get jealous about that all the time because I'm like, would I, in theory, have more energy if the sun was still out? But I think then I'm like, why would I want more energy that's not attached to capitalism? Becca, Olivia, what's up?
I'm amused. That's so if I had that's just one word, amused, on many different levels. But just highly amused. I'll just leave it there.
Okay, I feel like so we're laughing because this is the second meeting we've had today with I've had with Olivia and Becca, and the content of those meetings have been full of fun stuff that, you know, if you're not in my Patreon, you'll just miss out on. So boom.
So on that note, I'm coming in excited for all the new patrons that Tommy's going to have. And we're going to have a good time. And then you can find out what we really talk about in the Permission to Be meetings.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Do. So Andre, you wrote a book.
I did.
How does it feel to... You were already a writer, but like, is there like as much as we critique hierarchy, but is there like a hierarchy of feeling for like writing an article or maintaining a blog as opposed to like delivering a book into the world?
I would say that maybe before I wrote a book, I thought of like writing a book as like climbing Kilimanjaro or something, right? Like, and it is a huge accomplishment, right? But now that I have a book published, I'm like, things feel pretty normal. Things feel pretty normal. And I wasn't expecting for it to feel as normal as they do. What no one told me about writing a book is that I would be very tired after doing it, and I'd be very drained after doing it, and that I would not feel like writing for a while. I mean, maybe everyone doesn't have that feeling in particular, because I know some people who, like Lisa Sharon Harper, she just released a book in February, and she's still writing. I put that book out in March, and I was like, yeah. I don't know when you're getting an article from me again.
The gift of that sister's pen. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But to that point though, also, like, I would say, I know that many people, like, because before I wrote my book, many people were like, Andre, like, you're like a writer, like you're a good writer. And I'm like, yeah, but some people are like Sister Mary Clarence telling you, like, if you wake up in the morning and all you can think about is writing, then you're a writer. Like, some people are like that kind of writer,
Yes! You better take us to the Hope epic of the 90s.
I'm not that kind of writer, like I'm a musician first, like when I think about what is a good day, like I play my guitar, I play the keyboard, I try to write a song every day. So that's the thing I can do every day. But writing like some of my friends do, like about, social justice and all these things, that's just not the kind of writer that I am. Now, I did write a blog every single week for about 4 years, or, up to the publication of this book. And it was because, of not even, I'm not counting a bunch of, no, that's not 4 years. It was like 2015, 7, 8 years, something like that. I don't know. 7 years.
Wow.
Right. And so, like, I make that point, I guess, in the moment to say, like, not just because I had this passion for writing, but just because I really felt that this is important, the kind of the message that I want to get out there about social progress and systemic racism and, eventually nonviolent struggle. That was what drove me. So I was even surprised, like, even before I published the book, and, so many people, when I think it was around the time that I wrote an article about this media company I used to work for where racism was so, there's a racially sensitive climate, right? And that went viral. And then, all these people are like, man, you're such a good writer. It's like, wow, okay. I guess I'll keep doing that.
Yeah.
Well, what I would say to that, Andre, is that it's one thing to be able to put a noun and a verb together, and it's another thing to do it in a compelling fashion.
Right.
And so I am that writer's writer who like I get high on metaphor and simile. I went 2 years without sleeping, but at 2:00 in the morning, I'd be up writing poems and essays, and then like texting Tommy and Becca at 3:00 in the morning. Like the muse arrived at 4 a.m. So I am that person. And when I got my hard copy, I said, I'm not getting the Kindle because I want to read this on the page. But because we were going out of town, I got the, I got the hard copy. I said I wasn't going to get the Audible, but I did because I was like, well, I'm going to spend all this time in a car. It's a great time to listen. And I am not a good listener. And your book held my attention with you reading it. And so to me, that tells the story, because it's one thing to be able for me to hold my attention with my eyes on the page. It takes a different level for Olivia, because I have a touch of ADHD, to engage me through listening. and you mastered both, which is not shocking because I'd heard snippets of it in our writing group, you know, when you first started going down this path. But I'm just going to say, you may say you're not a writer, but I am a good writing snob, so to speak. Becca and Tommy will tell you that. And
Yes,
so
she
like
is.
a lot of stuff that's like everybody is raving about, I was like, this is boring. This is not a compelling narrative. It did not hold my attention. And so for me, it's not, the content is very important, but if you can't present the content in a way that is going to command the attention of the reader, then your purpose is lost. And so you get an A+ from me and my husband. We were both listening.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that. And when I say that about writing, I mean, just like you said, like, you know, I get that way about writing songs, you know, and that's where I'm about metaphor and simile and, you know, sense bound language and all that kind of stuff, which of course I use in the book, you know, like I'm using the same tools, but in a way, I mean, they're very different, right? I have a lot more space to say what I want to say in a book, which is really helpful because like in the song, it's like, all right, bro, you got 120 words. You know? What you want to say, you know?
It must be good to be you. You only believe what you want. And anything that you don't know, well, that just couldn't be true. Mister, you know it all. You got a college degree, so you're impressed with your words. You think the problem is me, disturbing your peace, but I'm living your world, where everyone is able to be anything that they want. There's a fence between the world and me. Not everybody sees.
You know, but the chapter of a book, I get 3,500 words, 5,000 words. That was my goal with each chapter, was under 5,000 words, right? That's a lot of words, you know? So you have a lot more room to play with. But, you know, I think about some people like that's, you know, that's their discipline, right? Like they know like the tradition. Like when I talk to someone like Dante, right? Dante Stewart, you know, and Dante is like, you know, he's naming all these different authors and all these different writers and, you know, what they were doing and da da da. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know all that stuff. You know, that's how I talk about music. Like, talk to me about music. I'll start telling you, like, why Billy Joel is one of the greatest songwriters to have ever lived. And I don't care how cheesy that sounds. I will tell you why I don't understand how Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 has not already started a socialist revolution. You know, you know, like I'll give you all the context of like where reggae music came from and how Jamaica helped upstart hip hop music and all that kind of stuff. Like that's my tradition, but you know they overlap for me, and I think a part of the audiobooks, the reason because I did the audiobook really fast, and it's because like I was a pastor for 7 years. You know, I have a lot of experience public speaking. I'm a performer. You know, I sing. You know, I'm comfortable in the studio. A lot of authors, they write. They don't necessarily, you know, do the other part with the speaking and stuff like that. But like I'm talking to you right now on the same microphone that I record my songs on. These are the same headphones that I bought in 2012 to record my first EP and stuff like that. You know, my keyboard's right next to me. No one can see it. So, you know, those gifts come in, but I appreciate y'all, you know. And I've heard this a lot about the book, about like people telling me like they can't, it's hard for them to put down, or they listen to it in one sitting. My dad listened to it. I think he might have listened to it more than once, you know. Which is like really humbling, and I appreciate a lot because I didn't know what to anticipate, you know, with it coming out.
You have a very soothing and calming voice, and
thank you.
There are some audiobooks where like the book is playing and I am physically in my seat listening, but I'm at Whole Foods shopping. It's like my body heard word, but like my mind has left. And that is not the experience I had with yours. So kudos to you on compelling storytelling and interweaving that with history and fact. Not everybody is skillfully able to do so.
There's so much about that dialogue got me really hyped up, because I'm just thinking about the amazing artistry that we have in this space right now. Olivia, you being a writer, Andre, you being a writer, but also musically, but then going a layer deeper, the historical knowledge that's there. And then I was also part of that, like that same sentiment of like, okay, read it. I read this in like one setting. I didn't want to put it down. And at the same time, I'm looking at this book like, damn, this is like a manual. This is like, I think it's good. It's good that it's compelling, but also I think for the particular healing that I think this book holds, I don't think you can consume it all in one setting and really get the depth and the benefit of it. And so I'm really interested to maybe spend some time bringing out some of those points that meet us here in this context that we're in, because I think, book came out in February. We were in a particular place in society, but even as you've been writing it, like we've gone through the Donald Trump presidency, we've gone through insurrection, we've gone through uprisings, we've gone through all these things, and then we're recording this on the heels of the Supreme Court leak and a lot of conversations around bodily autonomy and the future of the West and the United States as an empire, watching it crumble before us. So I'm curious, what are, one, tell the audience about the book. I have a feeling most people that listen to the podcast will already have heard some things about the book, but in that off chance that there's some people listening that are new, what are some things that you want to say about the book? And then maybe how, I'm curious about where should we anchor the conversation given the context that we find ourselves in today.
And can we start with the title of the book?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good job.
We do this all the time. We do this all the time. And it's Andre has written a book called All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep. Yeah. So,
Okay, so the name of the book, All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep, came from a blog that I wrote in 2019. It was an open letter to a bunch of white folks that I grew up with, or that I met, as I was, that I met along my life journey. Many of them close friends, some of them even I considered family, but they were online, some of them online, saying things like, Andre's a racist, Andre hates white people, all this kind of thing. And they were saying that stuff because over the past few years before then, I've been online, speaking up about systemic racism from my perspective. And by then, I'd given up on trying to speak, in the way that many people feel that you should about these things, because there's a common misconception out there that if you just talk really nicely and rationally to white people about racism, then you'll have a civil conversation about it. You'll see their point, they'll see your point, and you'll hug and you'll cure people of their anti-blackness one person at a time. I had given up on that.
Systematic oppression.
Yes. I'd given up on that, seeing as how it's bullshit. That was partly why these white people had been on saying these things about me, because I had been strident, I think is the word, in the way that I speak about these things. So I decided, you can't say these things like, I hate white people without a receipt. Show me the text message, show me the blog, show me the screenshot it, post it. You know, there is none because I never said that. So I wrote what I felt like was a receipt of my love for them. And I wrote them an open letter called to all the white friends I couldn't keep. And I laid out, to them why we had been separated, why our relationships had broken down. It was because of their refusal to believe Black people, to listen to Black people, to join in our struggle for racial justice and all those other things, right? Okay, I'm just gonna pause for a second, right? So a friend of mine has been encouraging me to just use my Jamaican accent, right? Mm-hmm. And I keep pausing because there are certain verbal pauses in patois that I'm trying to translate into English. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm going to give everyone a quick patois lesson, okay? So if I say "and all them something," that means "and all those things," right? I'll say it slowly. And all, you can hear, and all, them, something, some things, right? And all them something, right?
And all them something.
Very good. You're soon Jamaican. All right. So yeah, I wrote this blog. It went viral. An agent reaches out to me and tells me he feels like there might be a book in there. Or no, he's sure there's a book in there. And I was like, well, you're the professional at selling books. So, if you feel like it might be in there, I'm willing to try. And by the time I finished the proposal for the book, I had decided that I don't want to address it to white people anymore because I already know they're not listening. And I was exhausted just writing it from that perspective because I ended up writing an outline for a book that basically was like, here's what white people do, and here's why it's bad. We already have that book. Mm-hmm. We have several of them. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I don't think we need another. So instead, I want to write this book to my former self. Mm-hmm. I want to write the book that Andre needed when he was begging white people to listen to him. Mm-hmm. I said, I wish 8 years ago, Black Gabriel would have appeared to me with this book in his hand. And Black Gabriel would have said to me, I feel like Black Gabriel speaks patois. So he's like, I still not argue with them people then. Sure. Right? And he hands me a book that has, practical insight about how to create, how to move social progress forward, and giving me permission to not fight with these people. Why are y'all laughing so much?
You're doing great at integrating the accent. I just got to say, and like. We have history, so I'm like I'm watching this unfold in real time, and I'm having to this is the first time my nervous system is getting to experience this.
So everybody's watching me. Okay, so Una read the book, right? So you know exactly why, right? Because it's not even strong right now, right?
Right.
I have it on just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
One little drop of patois coming out, right? But if I were talking to my father right now, what? Oh. Boy. Okay, so where was I? I don't know. It's weird. I know. Gabriel. But I want for people when they. Okay, we'll get there. No. Okay.
Yeah.
So Black Gabriel gives me a book, and he gives me permission to not argue with these people. And why y'all keep laughing when I say permission?
The reason I am laughing is because I am the old lady of this bunch. I mean, I'm literally a grandmother, and I'm so much older than you. But I just as I listened through, I was like, damn, he is telling my story. Okay. And so when you're talking about, being like, this 9-year-old, afraid of left behind, and So I'm flashing back to my adult self, giving the Left Behind books to every. So it relates. So every time I hear you talk, I literally am old enough to be your mother. But I lived my own version of the same experience, and so that's why I can't stop cracking up. I'm sorry.
And
do I need to turn off my camera and hide my
face? And your authenticity, the authenticity of you.
I was just curious. I don't feel any way about it. I was just curious because I laugh a lot in general when I'm talking to people, and what people don't understand is that, like, if I'm giggling when I'm talking to you, it usually means that I feel like I've picked up on who you are, like the core of who you are, and I really enjoy it. And so, like, I am reveling in the fact that you are showing up as your full self in this moment, and you are you, right?
Yes.
I love that. I giggle, and people get offended. Why are you laughing at me? And I can't really explain to them. No, I'm not laughing at you.
I'm laughing with you.
You know?
I'm enjoying you, right? It's
exactly. I'm enjoying you being you. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. So then the last thing Black Gabriel gave me permission to do is to how would I say this? To actually embrace my blackness, right? And my blackness is connected to my Jamaicanness, right? Is African, but it's also connected to my Caribbeanness. And so that was the book I wanted to write, and that was the book that I set out to write. Even though I don't know, I say that my publishers would have been happy with the other book. I think they would have. I think my publishers would have been happy if I just wrote a book and was like, "Hey, white people, this is what you need to know about relating to Black people." But I didn't feel like that's the book that the world needs. Especially knowing what I know now. What I didn't know when I was writing the book is that a lot of the things that I was describing are just fascism. Yeah. I didn't know that, you know, until maybe I was maybe halfway through. I was halfway through editing it the second or third time when I realized, oh wow, like a lot of this is just fascism.
I don't know why you wanna go. Why do you wanna go to war? Hey, hey, hey. Hey. War. Why do you wanna go to war with me? Always looking for a fight. No one's always in the right. Oh, why do you wanna go to war with me? You're such a bad man in your eyes, but doesn't mean you're on the winning side. Your mouth like an open grave. Oh, your tongue like a razor blade. To anyone who doesn't think your way, and everything you say, everyone has to agree. Well, I am not afraid to tell you you're wrong, and so you wanna go to war. You got to go to war with me, because your ego can't accept like you talk to everyone else. You got to go to war. I see you need to go to war with me, cause your ego can't abide someone else speaking their mind.
So what made you make the connection?
Oh man. In the chapter Revolution Now, I'm writing about how America needs a fundamental change, right? Mm-hmm. How it needs radical change, right? And that's when I start understanding fascism, because I'm always reading as much as I can. I'm reading, and so at the time I was reading while I was writing the book, and what I was reading about was imperialism. And I was also reading about Black anti-fascism. I wanted to understand the Black anti-fascist tradition. And so I'm reading these texts, like We Charge Genocide, which was the letter that Black activists wrote to the United Nations about, what America was doing and all this kind of stuff. And so as I'm reading this tradition of Black anti-fascism and reading all this information about imperialism, and I'm writing this Revolution Now chapter, the connections were just undeniable. So then I come across, in my reading about anti-fascism, I read a book called Hitler's American Model. And in this book, the author, I can't remember his name, he talks about how Nazi legal scholars were studying Jim Crow and studying American imperial policy to shape the Nuremberg laws. And there was one quote, oh my God, and I put it in the book. I made sure it was in the book. And this is actually a part of the book that I keep hoping that people don't just gloss over too fast. Because there's one Nazi legal scholar that says the most important event in the history, in the Aryan's race for world domination, that's what he's saying, for world domination, was the founding of the United States of America. And so, that was me making the connection, because I had heard people like Angela Davis and the Black Panthers, many Black Panthers and all of them saying that America was fascist, but I didn't really understand. But I started reading about fascism and tyranny and all those things while I was writing that chapter. And it was just undeniable there. So that was the book I felt like I needed to write, was to help people really understand how racial progress is made through nonviolent struggle, because I've been reading that for years. And to also, a big theme of the book is kind of this pulling back the veil on America's myths, the national myths that America uses to cover up all of its violence, which is a part of fascist politics. When you're reading about fascism, it's like fascists always are alluding to a mythic past, right? Mm-hmm. And America has one, a very strong one.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I came across something the other day, and I think it was I don't know if it was a news segment or what, but white people talking about the myth of America has failed, or the thing that binds nations together are common myths. Mm-hmm. And I haven't been able to give much thought to it, but I'm curious, your point about fascism and this reliance on a myth, and then the fact that nations, there's this assumption that nations, to be a nation, you are also relying on sort of this common myth. Mm-hmm. I don't know where to go with that, but I'm like, do you think that there's a connection there? Because I guess the other thing that's in the back of my brain is there's a book called Sovereignty. I forget who's the author, but in it he's talking about how nation state sovereignty is one of the things that is going to just get us all killed. This concept of sovereign nation. Yeah. And so is it, from your perspective, is it true that nations have to have a common myth, or I don't know? When I think of myth, of how I was taught in grade schools about myth, is just a story that maybe happened, didn't necessarily have to happen, and to me that's a bit concerning.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm pulling from Paulo Freire. I think that's how you say his name. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Mm-hmm. and from a book I'm reading right now called Solidarity Economics. I can't remember the authors right now. I'm reading too many books right now. I read 6 books last week. And then I'm reading like 3 or 4 now. So I can't always remember where each piece is, Okay. And I'll connect this to my own book. I'll try. So a part of the context that I think you're alluding to, Tommy, is that humans are a different kind of animal because we have a perception of ourselves apart from our environment.
Yes.
Right, like my friend Jeline, her dog Kai is here, and Kai doesn't know that Kai is a dog. You know, right? And Kai never sits down and reflects on his life and says, "What am I doing? You know, what is my life about? What are my core values?" You know, like he's never gonna have that conversation with himself. Right?
Kai's like, "Oh, that butt scratch felt real good."
Yeah, he's just a part of his environment, right? But we do, right? We do, and that's how we relate to our reality. And the way that we manage all of this information that we're taking in is by telling stories. We put narrative frames around things. We can make sense of our lives, right? And so in a sense, we're always going to be, we are storytelling animals, and we're always going to be storytelling animals. And so we're always going to create narratives and stories around the things that we're doing, you know, whether that's nation building or, you know, making a family or whatever, you know, that we're always going to have some story. And your decision to move to this city or that city, or why you date this person or that, you're always putting that in the context of a story, right? And so in that way, yes, nations do need a story, right? They have to come up with some reason to make meaning of the project that they're creating. Now, does that story necessarily have to be oppressive? Does it have to include hierarchy? Does it have to justify inequality? No. Right?
Yeah.
But those are the stories that dominate the societies that we live in, many of us, right? I would say most of us, even the non-white nations, because the British Empire was so big, it deposited its own ideology and practice all over the world. So you have Black countries that still practice the same white violence that established them, right? All right, we gone a little off track, so let's come back, right? But yes, those stories exist, and those stories make sense of things, and so part of it is, you know, part of the challenge that we have is to create a story that creates a broader we, because the stories that we have create all of these us's and them's, right? Yeah. That justify all kinds of violence and inequality. But those stories are often never presented in that way. And that's what I'm writing about in like the first 2 chapters of the book, right? The introduction is kind of introducing this idea of apocalypse, right? Because it's talking about how the empires are very good at creating stories. And, you know, because I once thought I would be an Old Testament professor, I had to take those classes where I learn about Babylon and Assyria and Rome and all those places. And they all have their own ideology, right? And so, you know, every one of these empires are displacing people. They're killing people. They're massacring people. They are what do you call that? Exiling people and deporting. You know, all this violence. But the Assyrians say, if we don't kill off all these other nations, the world will end. So that's their imperial ideology. We have to stop the end of the world by conquering everyone around us. And Babylon's ideology is Nebuchadnezzar is the chosen gardener of the gods. And so if he conquers this nation or that nation, then they're going to flourish under his rule. And in Rome, they call it the peace of Rome. And if everyone would just be united under Caesar's rule, then the world will know peace. They always do that. And so America has its own manifest destiny. The Pilgrims talking about they're a city on a hill, all these other things. And those are the stories that were passed down to me and to many of us, all of us growing up. That's what we taught in school. I just watched a special about the Philippines from last week tonight with John Oliver. And they interview these children to talk about what was martial law like before. And I'm laughing because I want to say pick me so bad. I didn't pick me them never talk about the martial law. Right? And these children are saying things like, well, I think that martial law was a good thing, and I heard that the Philippines became more prosperous or more peaceful under martial law. These are the things that we are indoctrinated in as part of being part of a nation, right? Yeah. And so I received that kind of teaching when I was young. Remember, my parents are from Jamaica. And while we're at it, because I don't know if we're going to get there, so, I talk this way because when my parents, my mother's already gone, but when my father is dead, I want for people to know exactly where my ancestors come from as soon as they hear my voice. Mm. So that's why I'm using, more of my accent and all of that. So anyway, but remember, my parents come from Jamaica, right? They moved to Atlanta. They moved to Stone Mountain in the 1980s. And my father tells me that when he moved into Stone Mountain, first off, and I saw this as a kid, I didn't really realize it, but I remember seeing as I grew up, is that most of the white families that lived around us moved out of the neighborhood. That was one thing. But before they moved out, because moving out was their last resort, the first thing that they did, or I shouldn't say first, I don't know, earlier what they did was they start putting up Confederate flags around Stone Mountain.
Intimidation.
Right. Now, my family's from Jamaica. We don't know what the Confederate flag is. So we just start putting up Jamaican flags and Trinidadian flags. We don't know. we don't know what that was. So anyway, I just want to bring in the fact that my parents didn't know this stuff, So when I talk about Stone Mountain and the huge Confederate monument that's on the side of that rock, the largest bas-relief carving in the world and the biggest Confederate monument in the country, they couldn't tell me anything about the things I wrote about in the book, about it being the place where the Klan was reborn and it being commissioned by Klan sympathizers and, all those things. They didn't know those things. Yeah. But I also didn't learn those things in school because the things that we learned in school, we didn't talk about slavery very much, not in detail, right? I knew that it happened, but I didn't know the extent to which, how brutal. And there's not even words. That's why I use the ma'afa so much in the term the ma'afa so much in the book, because I learned that from a woman who was a mentor of mine, and it just feels so appropriate to refer to it by a non-English word, because I don't believe that any English word can do it justice. Can you say the word again? Ma'afa. Ma'afa. I just don't feel like any English word can do it justice. Like this. It's like how many Jews refer to the Holocaust as the Shoah, right? It's like, to me, the ma'afa. I keep pausing when I try to talk about it because we didn't learn how bad it was. In fact, there is this widespread belief that stems back to just after the Civil War that maybe slavery wasn't that bad, and white people very much wanted to promote this idea that Black people would have preferred to be enslaved. That we were happy as enslaved people. That's where all the minstrelsy and all these other things come from, right? Like, and those cartoons, there's the song the ice cream truck plays. That song is "Nigga Love a Watermelon," right? That's the name. That's the "Nigga Love a Watermelon," ha ha ha. Nigga love a watermelon, ha ha ha. Right? So, wait, stop.
Stop. Just stop.
You done it now.
Wait. Just let me finish and then because I don't want to lose it, right?
Okay.
So they were very committed to painting this picture that we were happy and contented as enslaved people, as inferior beings, as second-class citizens, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where all that stuff comes from, right? And then they wanted to reframe the reason for the Civil War as just an issue of states' rights, and they're rising up against the tyranny of big government and government overreach and all kinds of things. That's what we inherited, so that they could continue to push this national myth that America is just this hero of democracy in the world, right? And that was the education that many of us received, and so there's this pulling back of the veil I'm trying to do.
I see the children across the sea, left on the shore like trash and debris. I hear a nation sigh relieved, but it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be this way. Shattering windows, flashing lights, bullets tear the dark skin of the night. Sound of mothers swearing at the skies. No, it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be this way. Doesn't have to be. No, it doesn't have to be this way. Oh, you a little lower than the angels. There's a little bit of heaven in you. Oh, you, the power you've been given is a power you should live in. Oh, the world is in the shape that we choose. I hear the beast declare his lies. See all the people with flags held high. I see the world descend and fly, but it doesn't have to be. Hey, doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, yeah. It doesn't have to be this way. It don't have to be, hey.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I made that connection.
That's so good. That's so good. Olivia, have you recovered?
No, she hasn't. Look at her face.
Okay, just very brief. Nigger love a watermelon to say what? Like, what?
Those are the lyrics to the song.
No way.
Yeah, I'm promising.
Yeah. You've just now determined what the next hour after we're done recording this is going to be for Olivia.
Yeah,
so
okay. So I just want to point this out, right? Like, this is partly why I was in the hospital a few weeks ago, because like when you're living with this level of awareness of the anti-blackness around you, right? Like, how are you not going to go crazy? Because I hear that song in Inglewood. That song, I mean, I know like we've written other songs now, Turkey in the Straw and all that kind of stuff, right? Because obviously you can't sing Nigga Love a Watermelon in school, but still.
I don't think there's enough news outlets to cover.
Yeah. But I mean, this is that post-apocalyptic reality, right? Like when I think about the thing that we're doing, or that I'm saying that apocalypses do, is that they pull back the veil and you see the ugliness of the world. You see the monsters and the political monsters and the political violence that is usually hidden. Like, I think about like The Matrix, which I did think about a lot when I was writing the book, because the new Matrix movie was going to come out as well, like before the book was done. And so I rewatched the Matrix trilogy several times before I finished the book. And I thought about like how terrible the real world, that the quote unquote real world that Neo and the Nebuchadnezzar and Morpheus and all them live in. Like, they're eating this slop and the sky is scorched and they're running from machines and all this kind of stuff. I think that John does the same thing in the book of Revelation when he says, this is what Rome really looks like. Look at this many-headed monster, killing all of these people, and I think that, I know that for some people it's too bleak to talk about America in that way. I'm not saying that there's nothing good about living here, but when you pull back the veil, you can see, like, you can trace so much of the modern structure and the arrangement of our society back to its roots in a slaveocracy,
Mm-hmm.
And we can change that. It doesn't have to be this way,
Yes.
But if we're going to change it, then we have to at least admit that it's there, right? That's
Yeah.
where we are.
And a key point that you said earlier, you talked about the school system, and there was I love that illustration of where you were talking about picturing the column and like at the top, or like a Roman structure, and there's a column at the top, which is a problem, and then there's all these systems and structures that hold up that problem, and that's under this chapter of like building our own tables, which is right after you went off about fuck your unity, but in the best way possible.
Yeah, so that's like in this. Okay, so there's like a turning point in the book where the early chapters, you see me really trying to tiptoe around white people's feelings. And I'm trying to be very diplomatic and trying to appeal to their reason and their goodwill and all that kind of stuff and get them on my side. And then I learned that no matter how nicely I talk to them, like, it doesn't matter, because what really matters is how they've entered the conversation, right? Have you entered this conversation as someone who's willing to actually dialogue? Back to Paulo Freire, because he talks about the conditions for dialogue. And one of those conditions is humility. You can't have, and this will also touch on that unity chapter, right? Because everywhere when we talk about racism and we talk about how Black people talk about racism, you have white people basically saying, well, you sound angry, and, all those kinds of things, right? Oh, clamoring for civil conversation and all those kinds of things, right? Okay, but basically what they're saying is that we should be willing to dialogue, right? But I bring in Freire because he talks about how humility is a condition for true dialogue. We can't actually have a real dialogue if you enter the conversation feeling like you know everything and I know nothing. If you feel like I am your inferior, you feel like you have nothing to learn, nothing to gain from this, nothing to gain from listening to me, we can't have a true dialogue, right? So that's why, that's why I said I wish I'd read Pedagogy of the Oppressed before I wrote this book. I would have included more that I gleaned from that book, but he's saying something in a much smarter way than I am in the book. But basically, what I learned is that the conditions for true dialogue were never there with the people that I left behind. And that's why I had to stop talking to them, right? And the unity that people are calling for and that they imagine can happen is impossible, because if you are invested in my oppression, what are we going to unite around? Oppressing me?
Make it make sense.
It won't. Ever.
Cause me nah do that. I'm not doing that. So what are we going to join forces to do exactly? We can't join forces around my oppression. And you don't want to join forces with me around my liberation. Mind you, my liberation is your liberation.
Yes,
right?
100%.
So you don't want to join forces around me around your liberation either. So we're at an impasse. Okay. All right. So what we have to do, I'm arguing in the book, is we have to build the actual thing that brings racial progress, because hugging white people and singing Kumbaya, not going to do it, you know? And I remember one interviewer who talked to me about the book. He hadn't read it, which I understand. You know, I don't expect every interviewer to read the book. I don't read every book before I interview someone. Who has the time, right? So, you know, I mean, I appreciate that. But even if you hadn't, I would, you know, I understand, you know. So he reads a quote about the book, and from which they left out a crucial word. So I kept getting in trouble because the copy for this promo for the book kept leaving out one word. And so it's the part where I say civil discussions and diversity hires and those kind of things are not going to solve the problem. But I said those things alone won't help, but alone won't help.
Very key. Very key.
That's key. They do have a role, but they're not the thing. And so the guy is reading this back to me and it says, I disagree with it, by the way. And he's like, you know, and he's like, well, why won't it help? And I said, okay, answer me this. How many national discussions on race have we had? If that worked, would we still be having this conversation? No.
Mm-hmm.
Now tell me, how did the buses get desegregated and the water fountains and the restaurants and all those things? How did the voting rights bill come to be? Did Dr. King drop down into Birmingham and lead mass civil conversations with white people, with white races? No, didn't happen, right? It's always social movements that move the needle forward for freedom. Always. Whether it's an armed uprising or a mass nonviolent movement, the way that people get free is for oppressed people to organize amongst themselves and withdraw their labor, withdraw their dollars, occupy some shit. You know, they have like, that is how it works. And so that's what I'm calling for in the book, right? But a part of that, and so you're building your own tables, is that we have to have some kind of institutional power.
Social progress has always been won by a few outraged, organized, ordinary people. They weren't born on Mount Olympus. They weren't deputized through some angelic visitation. They were just ordinary, outraged people who decided they had enough of oppression. We don't need any messiahs. We need ordinary, organized, outraged people. We need you. You have the power to bring this society to a halt.
When the Nazis took her husband, she was shocked and terrified. My God, can you even imagine? But she chased the paddy wagon as tears fell from her eyes, down to Rose Street where the soldiers kept their captive. A sea of angry women gathered in the snow, shouting at the soldiers, saying, let our husbands go. The soldiers drew their weapons, but the crowd refused to move. That's how those women overthrew Hitler's evil plan. And it's the people won before, then we can win again. People of the world, let's get it started. Everyone has got a role to play. We don't have to feel helpless or discarded. Where there is a will, we can make a way. The police came to arrest the lady when she refused to give her seat up for a white man.
And it doesn't have to be the established institutions. Now, I did include a little bit in there to say, I think that there's an interim phase possibly where Black people having power in established institutions could be helpful. I do think that Daniel Hunter, the activist who wrote Building a Movement to End the New Jim Crow, would call them advocates, and advocates have a role. But I'm calling for civil resistance, and civil resistance is by definition non-institutional in the sense that, it's not about. So civil resistance is not everybody get out and vote. That's not civil resistance. Sure, go vote, but we didn't vote away Jim Crow. We shut down cities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm calling for. And to do that, we need institutional power. And that means two things to me. One is that we need the institutional resources like we saw in the civil rights movement. Like, this is why the churches and the schools, the labor unions, and all those things were in the vanguard of the civil rights movement, because they already had communication networks. They had leaders that a bunch of people already respected. They had, they had all of this infrastructure, And part of what is missing from our movements today is that we don't have a lot of infrastructure, because we got a lot of anti-strategy people out here who feel like if you just get millions of people out on the streets and yell defund the police enough, M&Ms will fall from the sky and it'll happen.
Shots fired!
But as we say in Patois, no go so. That's not how it works. Right?
Preach. Preach on.
And then we wonder at the end of the summer, where did everybody go? And at worst, some activists and organizers start yelling, "Where is your outrage? You guys weren't serious about this. Y'all were faking, da-da-da-da-da." But no, the thing is that this kind of revolutionary action, especially through nonviolent struggle, takes years. The Montgomery bus boycott was 13 months. In Gandhi's movement, you're talking, over a decade of nonviolent work. In Serbia's case, also a decade. It takes years, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that you are able to sustain movement over years is by building structure, right? Giving people roles, giving them things to do, right? And then if people start getting tired and they get burnt out, then you have a structure to, let them take their break, and you have someone else to come continue the work, and you're recruiting people and all those things. That's how it works, right? So that's a part of the institutional power that we need, right? Is the actual, civil rights, human rights institutions, movement institutions that are training people, recruiting people, and putting people into the right roles and all those kinds of things. There's another kind of institutional power that I want to also bring up, though, which is the building of the alternatives, right? I talked to Erica Chenoweth the other day. She's the scholar that brought us, one of the scholars that brought up the 3.5% rule, that no regime was able to withstand the active nonviolent resistance of just 3.5% of the population in a massive study that they did years ago. And Erica told me that around the world, we are losing more battles through nonviolent struggle than we're winning.
Wait, say that last part again. You're losing more than you're winning? Is that what you said?
We're losing more battles through nonviolent struggle than we're winning.
Okay.
And the reason why we're losing more battles is not because nonviolence is weak or something like that. It's because people are not using the most effective tactics and strategies of nonviolent struggle that have been used throughout the years. And this is connected to the fact that we are not given a good education about how these things work, right? And so, like I said, the people who think that if we just get enough people to go out to the streets and yell, "We don't like this," and, Mufasa will return to Pride Rock and it will rain again, don't understand that it's a game at this point. It's like, okay, what's another one? Okay. Is that there are classifications of nonviolent action, and in this first classification, it's protest and persuasion. right? And those are expressive politics. Those are going out and saying what we feel and all those kind of things. And it raises awareness. It can bring people into the movement. It can recruit people. It can get spirits raised and all those kinds of things. And then the next movement is, and the next classification we might call civil disobedience. People have heard, right? And civil disobedience is the kind of thing, like they make an injunction against protest, you protest. That kind of thing, right? And then there's interventions, right? And in those latter classifications, you start thinking about, okay, well, what is the nature of this oppression, right? If it's economic, then maybe we need to organize a boycott. Maybe we need to organize some strikes or something like that, right? That's just for instance. Now, a protest has its role and it does its thing. It's important. But without the muscle of some of those more disruptive tactics like the boycotts and the strikes, the powers that be can just ignore you. They don't care. They don't care if you don't like what they're doing. They already know that. When we go out into the streets and say we don't like this with all our signs and our posters and all this kind of stuff, we're telling them something they already know. Mm-hmm. It doesn't put as much pressure on them as if they start losing customers. Mm-hmm. And if their workers refuse to work, Yeah. So that's why we're losing more battles than we're winning. Okay, so right now, when we talk about the Supreme Court, that you mentioned, right? And there are ways that civil resistance can be used to pressure the courts to actually respond to the will of the people, because we know that the majority of people in the U.S. actually are in support of reproductive rights. Right? It's like 2/3. We are literally under minority rule right now.
Yes. Yes.
So the idea of a general strike has come back to the fore. I hear people talking about general strike. I am all for the general strike. Oh my God. Dear 8-pound, 6-ounce Black Jesus, please, in my lifetime, might I live through a general strike? I would love that. However, people cannot just strike because they have bills to pay. They have families to feed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in order for the people, and remember, it's not necessarily, there are some people, I would say, or some people in certain professions for whom a strike is more disruptive than others, right? I work for a nonprofit. And if I say I'm not working today, that now have nothing to do with the Supreme Court. They're not going to feel that, right? But there are medical professionals who, if they participate in civil disobedience or something like that, that's going to mean more, right?
But let me tell you, organizing some nurses is a task.
Yes, but for them to be able to do that, right? We need to know, like, if they get arrested, do we have money to bail them out, right? If they don't work, will they be able to eat? Can we pay them to strike? That kind of thing. And that's the other kind of institutional power that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Is the Montgomery bus boycott had a carpool, right? Because people still have to get to work.
Yeah.
People still have to get to where they're going.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to encourage people through the book, as far as the manual part that you're talking about, is like helping people to think more practically and strategically about creating racial progress. Mm-hmm.
Damn, you're so deep. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I feel like there's I feel like we're also surfacing, and you talk about this in the book, some problems. And I think and as I'm thinking about my role in the next few months, in the next few years, with my knowledge base and how I can show up, one of the things you talk about is conflict in movement space. And yeah, it's not just like I don't think we generally live well with conflict, not just in movement space, but it's not necessarily a valued skill. Learning how to deal with people emotionally, learning how to work with our bodies. And so one of the questions that I had was, as you were talking about kind of building our own tables, institutions, but also like how you always say, like, we have kind of this failure of imagination.
Yeah.
What might we need? Like, have you been able to dream any about, like, what would it look like to have practical systems that could navigate like conflict in spaces? Because I'm convinced that that needs to be foundational, like 101 level type stuff when entering into movement space. Like, do you know how to navigate conflict?
I'm going to just be really real with you. I struggled so much with publishing this book because by the time it was time to publish, I just felt like the movement was full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say that as though I'm not a part of the shit, you know? So as soon as I say that, I have to say, I'm part of the problem, you know? I was diagnosed with PTSD last year, largely because of conflict with other activists, Black activists.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to identify them any further, but we could go into their other identities too, and it just gets more complicated and more problematic. And so I say that to say one of my biggest okay, here's one thing. One thing that's weakening movements in general is a lack of unity. In nonviolent struggle, they have what they call a holy trinity, and unity is God the Father. You know, like, from whence the others proceeded. You know, so unity is so important. And it's really easy to say that we should be unified. It's even easier to say we as Black people should be unified. But unity is complicated, right?
Yeah.
Solidarity is complicated. All Black people don't have solidarity with one another. We're divided across class and gender and sexuality and nationality and all those kinds of things, right? So that's one thing. The disunity is weakening a lot of movements, and I've seen that a lot. Another thing I think is that we say, "All right, I'm not fucking with white people no more," or "I'm not fucking with, you know, insert whatever group is symbolic or actually your oppressive counterpart." And we start talking as though the people that we're going to be around are perfect. The movement people that we're going to work with, or the new people we're going to surround ourselves with, are going to be perfect. And people have this desire to see people who have perfect politics and perfectly execute their values, perfect praxis, all these things. And I played around with calling it a kind of purity culture, and I'm worried about whether or not that was appropriate language, but I think it really is. There's a desire for purity that is unrealistic, that I think leads to a kind of hypocrisy. And again, I'm saying I'm part of the problem, right? Okay, let me get to that in a second. Please hold the part where I'm a problem. Put that on ice. Keep it cool for me. I'm coming back to that one. But the hypocrisy, right? The hypocrisy that I'm talking about is some of us will march the streets for a dead black man we've never met. And will say, no matter what he did, he didn't deserve to be killed by the police in the street. No matter what he did, he didn't deserve to be in prison because no one deserves to be in prison because prisons don't do what we say prisons do, right? But we don't have that same attitude for living black people who hurt us. We cancel each other. I'm not talking about cancel culture, you know? I'm not talking about, you know, people getting called out online and stuff like that. I'm just talking about we cancel each other.
Mm-hmm.
I've canceled people. There are people who are social justice oriented. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. There are people who are committed to justice. They want the same things that I do in the world. And I cut them off. I blocked their number. I put a filter on my email so it would go straight to the trash. And I've tried to make amends with them. I've reached out to some, you know, and said, hey, is there any way that we could talk about this? Even if we're not friends anymore, you know, even if we won't be friends after that conversation, is there any way that we can bring some repair? And I don't think that they're going to answer me. And there are people who would probably like to have that conversation with me, who I'm not going to answer. Maybe some of this is just life. But there's a part of me that says, aren't we championing a world where we don't cancel each other? Where the state doesn't cancel people, where the state doesn't assign people to civil and social debt, right? Isn't that the world that we're championing? We can't even practice it with each other. Now, I know that the reason why I'm choked up is because I have my own pain around that, right? Where I have felt judged, abandoned, betrayed by people in the movement. And some of that, I feel like, is a part of a very natural and common process that I think Fanon talks about and Paulo Freire talks about, where there's a certain part of our development of breaking free and decolonizing where we can create this very singular and simple binary story where there are good people and there are bad people. And the good people are good and the bad people are entirely bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can even say, you know, well, you know, white people are categorically bad, right? And there's a way to theorize around that to make that make sense. You know, because you can say some people appear to be white, but they're not actually white because whiteness is, you know, not just about skin color, da 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 da. You can do that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but you can do that. You can say, you know, white people are categorically bad. Men are categorically bad. Cis people are categorically bad. Straight people are categorically bad, right? And then they become disposable.
Did you say they become disposable?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, they become disposable. And I have felt disposable in those ways, right? But it's not just, and I admit that I have pain around that, but I also have to admit that I have caused that kind of pain because I've come into the movement with my own trauma. And sometimes I know I'm having a trauma response and this person does something and it reminded me of some heartbreak I had a long time ago. And I'm just like, I know that this is going to suck, but I can't see you anymore. Like I'm going to block you on social media, all that kind of stuff. And it's not to punish you. It's going to feel like punishment to you, but I'm not trying to punish you. But I also don't know that I have the capacity to see you. Da, 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 da.
Yeah. But I think you can say like da 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 there, but like in that da 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 da, there's some really important physiological things happening.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that, right? But of course, we've not gotten to the point, and this is also what I wanted to bring up, is saying like we don't have really a lot of infrastructure or practice in helping people to see one another in their entire humanity, right? And keeping their humanity intact and dealing with the nuance of these things. And that's why I brought up, I'm not trying to say it's hypocritical, but it is contradictory, right? Because again, we'll march the streets for people we've never known, people we never even lived in the same city as them, and we'll never know them. We don't know their families. We don't know what their voice sounds like, We'll march the streets for those people. You know, we'll walk until your Achilles are sore for some of these people, you know? And maybe it's because it's easier than like actually working through conflict, right? I'm also reading We Do This Till We Free Us. Well, first off, We Will Not Cancel Us is a great book. Adrienne Marie Brown, very short. Everyone should read that book. But I'm also reading We Will Not Free Us by Marian Kaba. And what is really challenging to me about the idea of abolition and transformative justice is the idea that the harmed, we prioritize the person who has been harmed and make sure that they have what they need in order to be healed and to be whole, right? To move on, all that kind of thing. And then we also give attention to the harm doer, right? And what are the conditions that cause them to act that way, understanding that hurt people. And so we don't lose sight of their humanity either, right? And there is this movement for us to do that because we live under a system that tells us that canceling and punishment and all those things are the way to deal with harm. And we know that it doesn't work. And so we're telling the state to do something or to do something different. But we haven't figured out how to really do that amongst ourselves and our communities. For the most part, that's where I'm coming from. That's what I see, right? And a lot of that is that we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We don't have the practice and enough practitioners and enough training to do that. And one thing that challenges me from this book that I mentioned, We Do This Till We Free Us, is they were talking about y'all gonna have to put a content warning on this whole episode, right? Watermelon and all this kind of stuff. So, but they're talking about, you know, sexual assault, and they were saying, you know, about this nuance of, yes, we want accountability. We do not want to send these people to prison because we don't believe that prisons should exist, right?
Yeah.
And doing that without being rape apologists, right? But one question that they asked, are just really powerful. They were saying, in what ways does our culture enable to be accountable? You know, because we don't live in a culture where accountability, not just for that, but I mean, obviously, I've never done that, so like I don't need that kind of accountability. But in other ways, I do need accountability, right? And accountability is not easy in our culture because we don't have the structures for it, really. The last thing I want to say about that is I've been playing around with this a bit. I can't remember. Oh, it was from my second mushroom trip.
You just fell out.
My second mushroom trip was with my older brother. My older brother, when we were younger, was a bully. He was a bully. He was a real bully. And I mean, it's hard to convey. It's hard to convey just how toxic that relationship was. Actually, I mentioned it in the book. I said that we had as good a relationship as Israel and Palestine. And a Palestinian person actually reached out to me and said, you know, this is problematic because it gives the impression that the conflict between Israel and Palestine is just between two parties that are different or have different opinions or whatever. And the thing that I'm thinking is, you don't know how bad that relationship with my brother is, because if you understand Israel as a bully, then that's what I'm telling you about my brother. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was real concern from my mother that my brother would kill me one day, because he said that he would.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my older brother and I are best friends now. And that took many years. But that mushroom trip, I started with the intention that I wanted, because you know it can rewire your brain. It can help kind of lay a new coat of snow there, and you can create new pathways. And so I wanted to deal with the way that sometimes I'm kind of snappy, and the way that I say things don't sound the way that they do to other people in my head. Like, I know, like, someone's going to be offended that I was like, y'all niggas think y'all going to go outside and say, defund the police, and Mufasa's going to come back to Pride Rock and it's going to rain. I don't know why that's just how it sounds in my head. So I'm like, but I know that sounds really like you didn't have to say it that way.
Oh, I love you so much.
I understand, right?
The amount of mental gymnastics I sometimes have to do to get the verbalize product, because my brain is just that direct as well.
Yeah. So I go into this mushroom trip hoping that I can deal with that. Now, you know, psychedelics is all about your intention and your set and mental set, or setting and set, right? So I already am going in trying to get into my shadow, which I didn't think about before I did. If I thought about if I thought about this,
you would have had a god, bitch.
If I had thought about that before I did this, then I might have had a less challenging trip. But I literally am starting this trip I'm going into my shadow.
Oh wow, man.
Wow. So the trip starts, and I'm like really anxious, and I'm, seeing all this stuff that's really hard to see. And I call my brother, and I'm like, will you please just come and be here with me? Mm. And he was kind of busy, but then he was like, all right. And then actually, what's really funny too is his car broke down not far from the house. So serendipity, fate, whatever you want to call it. But he really had nothing else to do and so he came, and we sat in my mother's living room, and I'm lying on the floor, and you know how shrooms are, just enjoy the colors. Oh wait, y'all in North Carolina, you have no idea what shrooms are like. No, we don't. You don't know what I'm talking about.
We picked Olivia up off the floor. Yeah.
You know, because you watched the Netflix documentary about psychedelics.
I know.
That is so good. I learned so much.
We have to create stories and narratives.
Oh, I learned so much. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So this earth is very cool.
And I'm enjoying the colors and stuff. And all of a sudden, I look across the room, and my brother looks like he is an angel. And I told him, I said, Chris, you look like an angel. And we're talking about this, and then I said to him, did you ever resent our family for not seeing how beautiful you are? And we talked about, all of these things. And I said, I just feel like when I was younger. No, sorry, before I'm going to tell you that, I said, Chris, tell me about a time when you were my guardian angel, but I didn't realize it. Mm-hmm. And so Chris told me about this time when I said something smart to someone in elementary school, and they all wanted to beat me up. And he went and he fought them by himself. And I didn't even know about it. And I knew that he carried that in his heart for a long time because we didn't get along. And it's partly why he resented me. It's because he was my guardian angel in many ways when I was younger. And I didn't know. And so I said to him, I just felt like you were a bully. It was really, it wasn't that. I said those words, but it was like, just feel like when we were younger, pause and just bully. And he said the words that I think anyone who was trying to express something to someone who's caused them harm was to hear. He just said, I know. That's it. Mm-hmm. No excuse, no explanation, no justification, no alternate narrative, just I know. And that healed so much of the past. We were already friends by then. But anything that was still outstanding, just those two words healed all of that. Mm. So I held out my pinky to him and I said, okay, Chris, give me your pinky. Now, I was not that high anymore. I was coming down, but I was like, I'm going to milk this. Because he's going to let me get away with a lot because I still have the psilocybin in my system. So I said, give me your pinky. And he gave me his pinky and the pinky promise. I said, okay, today you and I have a new story. The new story is that you have always been my guardian angel. Deal? And he said, okay. I said, I love you. He said, I love you. And we hugged. And now, when I'm having a hard time, or I have a song that I want someone to give me feedback on, or whatever, I call my older brother. So I tell this story to say, I believe that restoration is actually possible. I believe that healing is actually possible, and all of that. And I think that we have to be willing to do that in our movements if we want for them to be strong. I think that that moment with my brother is a little taste of the kind of world that we're trying to build. But I don't see a lot of people who are willing to do it.
So deep, so profound. And yet you have encouraged me, I think, to have hope. I think we're doing something right now that we also have never done. Like you said, that's never been done before. We have like rhymes.
Yes.
Of the past, but to navigate this in the age of the internet, in the age of acceleration, in the age of surveillance, where we don't have, a good portion of us don't have literal shackles. That identify us, I think it gets harder because we're having to root into our humanity in a different way. And so what I do know is that sometimes rupture, there needs to be space and time. And so how do we, the open questions for me is like, how do we normalize that space? And it's like, I'm not blocking you because I think you're a shit person, but like for both of us, for both of our health, for both of our safety, for both of our flourishing, and maybe we can come back together and maybe not, and that's okay. And we can still want the same things. And I think that's a really hard thing that we are being called into and learning in a very real way, but in a way that, we've never had to do it this way before with this much access as well. And that's both a blessing, I think, at times, and also amplifies the intensity of the struggle.
I agree with you, and I think that we just have to get really clear about what's our vision for tomorrow. I write about that in the book, but we have to get very clear. What kind of world do we want to build? Because, there maybe people disagree with this, but, the folks that I've read, to understand social change, social progress, a lot of times a theme emerges that the means need to match the end. And one of the strengths of nonviolent struggle has been that people usually have to practice the cultures and the same behaviors and all those kind of things that they will need in the kind of world that they want to build, right? Nonviolent struggle is usually democratic, and so on and so forth. And so it doesn't mean like perfection is out of the question, right? That can't be a goal, and purity is out of the question, and handling these things perfectly is out of the question. But I do think we need to get clear about what world are we really trying to build, because then we need to make the means match it, right? Otherwise, we're just going to be virtue signaling online until climate disaster claims us all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I hate to be that, bleak about it, but like,
The dog agrees.
Yeah, but we have to get clear about what kind of world we want to build, because even if we have to separate, and conflict happens, it's a part of relationship, we can do it in a healthier way, and we need that internally, and so it's one thing to write, all the white friends I couldn't keep and talk about how these dynamics of white supremacy into these different relationships. But I keep joking around about how my next book is going to be These Niggas Don't Want to Be Free.
Thank you so much, Fred. You're fantastic. I just appreciate you. Bye.
See you.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on Permission to Be. You can learn more about today's guest by going to permissiontobepodcast.com. We are also on all the social medias. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Permission to Be Podcast, or Twitter at permission_be. We would love to hear from you and let us know who you might want to have on as our next guest. If you will leave us a rating and review, in your review, you can put the name of people or persons who you think might be a great guest for the Permission to Be podcast. We hope you have a wonderful day.